Ladies and gentlemen, woke is dead, and I'm here to read the autopsy report. Dearly beloved, we're gathered here today to celebrate the long overdue, well-deserved, and frankly hilarious death of wokeness. It fought a good fight. By which I mean, of course, that it screamed, grifted, shamed, canceled, Karen, conned, lied, looted, hustled, deconstructed, depantsed, desexed, rioted, pillaged, burned, and bullied its way to power. But in the end, it was no match for reality. This is the wake for the story of woke. And just like that, the curtains came down, the lights came on, and everyone suddenly realized they had been watching the dumbest shit show in human history. But I remember when the madness began. It started with a whisper. Then a slogan, then a hashtag, then an HR meeting, a corporate policy, a federal mandate. Then suddenly I was standing in front of a bathroom sign that read, "Pick your adventure." That's when we were told that men could have periods, that women could have beards, that drag queens were the new priests, that libraries were their new temples, that Shakespeare, the Bible, and Tolkien were out, that religion was retrograde, and suburban parents had to ask their babies' consent in order to give them a hug. But schools could help transition them without any permission from anyone. That was the way of modern progressive education. Students only served the agenda. Teachers only twerked on OnlyFans. Discipline was out. Dunce caps were in. Winning wasn't taught because losing hurt too much. So all losers were winners, even if it meant every child lost the war on life. And then suddenly, absentee Adderall moms were identified as perfect. Fathers of the Year were tagged as domestic terrorists. Homes were designated as death camps, and schools were labeled as safe-space experiments. That's when they reverse engineered everything. When pride was all that mattered. When prom kings switched places with queens. When participation trophies became a protected class. When even missing school was branded as racist. Diversity, equity, inclusion actually had the balls to call it disparate impact theory, the big one. Systemic racism 101. That's when reading and writing became racist. When math was racist. When milk was racist. When crayons were racist. When gingerbread men were racist. When going to the gym was racist. Hell, getting healthy and fit was considered a national crime, and that came right before all newborns were labeled as potential racists to be. And you know what the worst thing is? If you said you weren't racist, congratulations, they said you were part of the most racist race of all. Then suddenly, we couldn't be colorblind anymore, because that meant dismissing all the authentic experiences of any person of color who lived in the most oppressive, vile, evil, racially biased society in the world. And right then and there, Dr. King's dream was chemoed like cancer, straight into the coffin, and segregation was resurrected like a DEI zombie, dragging America back all the way to 1952. Fuck, they even changed our national motto. We went from E pluribus unum, out of the many one, to the woke edition, out of one many. They switched out unity for division and shoved everybody into victimhood tribe zones so the elites could stay into power. That was part of their secret sauce to turn crazy into a cult. See, woke, by my definition, is a religion for the religionless, a god for the godless, with one sole commandment written on an avocado skin. All losers will be made to feel like winners, so the few in charge can rule over the many. And to help them do that, to sell that idea, they started by killing words. That's when they told me that words were violence. Unless they came from the marginalized, of course. Then those words were sacred and holy. Then words were currency. And then suddenly, all comedians' funny words were canceled, burned, and purged. Then normal words were replaced, not to clarify, but to confuse. And in the process, create a whole new class of criminals. That's how you had ladies and gentlemen, an ordinary everyday greeting got turned into hello, everyone. And then hello was canceled because they thought it was too cold. Then hey bought the farm, but it was only for horses. Then hi hopped around for a bit until finally someone got offended. Then people just stopped speaking. Except, of course, for those who still spoke, and they found a way to fill the silence by saying howdy, an outdated phrase. It's too damn nosy, strength and strong, canceled on the spot, too damn toxic and macho, handicapped, too hateful, disabled, too mean, able-bodied, too cruel, people of differing abilities sounded a touch too exclusive. So naturally, they labeled everybody survivors, even if they were born that way. But the woke weren't done, not by a mile. They took the word brave and battered it into a billion pieces because they thought it was too high a bar for anyone to reach. Smart was slashed. It made differently intelligent people feel left out. Crazy was erased because it was too precise of a definition for the mentally misunderstood. Illegal was outlawed. Criminal was canceled because it was too contentious. And even prisoner got in on it. Prisoners got a new name. They became justice-impacted individuals because thieves and murderers didn't like hearing the public call them thieves and murderers. It actually hurt their feelings. See, words are how we make sense of everything around us. They're how enemies make peace, how strangers make friends, how freaks form cults and furries find families. They're how lovers get down in love. Words would help us to define what's right and wrong in the world. And woke hated that the most. So they spun us around like a top until we were all lost. That's why they came after the labels next. The blind weren't blind anymore. There were people who were merely sight challenged. The deaf weren't deaf anymore. There were people with differing hearing experiences. They literally could hear everything you couldn't hear, but couldn't hear a fucking thing you actually heard. The homeless became unhoused. The poor became impoverished. The fat became people of size. The stupid became neurodivergent. And then you had the single. They became self-partnered because too many people couldn't handle the truth that they were autonomously oppressed. As for the divorce, they became consciously uncoupled. And you can thank Gwyneth Paltrow for that one. But even the lazy got in on the grift. They decided to actually do a little bit of work. They got a new name. They were called the Quiet Quitters because working for them had been oppression in their past lives. So ask yourself, who the hell didn't have ancestors in chains at one point or another? Where the fuck is my check? So woke use all the words to cancel you for the words you used to say before they changed the definition of all words till no word meant anything. And then suddenly, anyone can use any word to mean anything as long as they use the right words. Anyone except you. Your words only counted if you remained silent. Guilty until proven guilty. That's about the time I was told that virtue signaling was born. It was done so Hollywood celebrities could rant online and feel morally righteous, so Harry and Meghan could pose as for-profit philanthropists and flash their paid-for smiles. So AstroTurf activists could block highways and trap single moms in their cars, taking their kids bleeding out on the front seat to the emergency room, and they did it all in the name of peace, or Palestine, or Floyd, or fuck, even a Super Bowl celebration. They did whatever it took to get trending on X the fastest. That's when virtue signaling went into full swing. So Stop Oil could glue their paw prints on history, rip up Van Gogh's masterworks, and claim to be building an eco-friendly future. So BlackRock could spread ESG like an STD, so Larry Fink could play the Keebler Elf of green virtue, so the World Economic Forum could preach, you will own nothing and be happy, all while dining on Japanese Wagyu and Pappy Van Winkle. Because didn't you know, peasants deserve bugs, not luxury bourbon. It was all done so identity politics could turn Target into a fetish store for kids and call it noble so the mainstream media could kill Merry Christmas with Happy Holidays and declare mission complete. So Twitter could become a truck stop for the FBI and call it safety. So America's founding fathers could be posthumously charged at Nuremberg. Didn't you know? History must be judged by today's standards. That's the law according to woke. That's when virtue signaling took on a whole new meaning. Grifters wanted to empower themselves and help sell the lie some more. It was done so Leonardo DiCaprio could claim to be a climate crusader, all while jumping on his private jet and fleeing California's wildfires faster than he could change the diapers on his barely legal squeeze. So Hollywood could showcase 90-pound girls kicking 200-pound grown men's asses and call it feminism. So Kathleen Kennedy could invent the art of self-insertion and kill movies. And in the process, turn women into men, men into beta males, and transform every Mary Sue into an estrogen-deprived Karen looking for a hormone high by gaslighting the audience. Kennedy killed Star Wars with a message, buried Indiana Jones in a nursing home, and hung Willow on a Cabbage Patch tree, all to declare victory for Gloria Steinem. But what she didn't realize is the fact that she killed great storytelling. See, movies are modern bards. They mark every moment in time from our childhood to the grave. And Star Wars, like many other people, it was special to me. It was the first movie that I saw when my father was my legend, the hero that I loved. The first movie I saw before he kidnapped me at the age of 7, chained me in a basement, beat me marinating in his hate for my mom. And Empire Strikes Back was the first film I saw when I was rescued when I was free. So for me, fuck you, Kathleen Kennedy. Now, the reality is, they only did this for one reason. So every broken toy in the world could feel normal by breaking the world. That's when the oppression industry celebrated its grand opening. They hung up new signs, victims wanted, now hiring. Hate became the new economy, victimhood the new currency, resentment a new trust fund, and everyone was drafted into the war. That's when they turned around and told us that smoking was still bad for you, but weed was a superfood, fat was healthy, and 3 Big Macs a day kept the doctor away because big wasn't bad, it was just the beginning. Lizzo would become your new role model because nothing says empowerment quite like diabetes in a thong. That's when mothers-to-be would be known as pregnant people because woman had become a slur, when tampons were marketed for men because misgendering a prostate was a mortal sin. When PETA sued SeaWorld for practicing dolphin slavery, but everyone in Seattle called a 6-month belly bump a clump of cells. That's when it all happened. When Victoria's Secret sadly swapped out their sexy angels for my next-door neighbor, and Playboy, the magazine I grew up with, sneaking peeks at behind my mother's back, now featured on its cover my girlfriend's dad in fishnets, proving once and for all the world had officially gone mad. That's when discrimination was rebranded as social justice because the woke kept shouting that racism is worse than ever. So hiring quotas became healing. Hyphens made some Americans feel more American than the other half. Critical race theory made its educational debut as Revenge with the Syllabus, and the 1619 Project didn't just rewrite history, it blamed traffic jams on slavery. That's when Gandhi's nonviolent approach took a back seat. It got axed. It wasn't gangster enough for the revolution. And science was branded as colonial violence. Because didn't you know the scientific method is now officially a hate crime? That's when cultural appropriation became the latest fad. So if you wanted to wear dreadlocks, nope. Only if you're Bob Marley's cousin. Wanted to practice yoga, strictly for Indians. Downward facing dog was a federal offense for anyone not sporting a bindi. And if you wanted to open up a sushi restaurant, you best hope your grandmother was from Tokyo. Otherwise, you're shit out of luck. That's when woke decided to define DEI for Main Street. Meritocracy was instantly canceled as an oppressive tool of the white guy. Diversity meant hiring by color, not competence or character. Hell, Disney's board defined diversity as a skill. Inclusion meant excluding anyone with a different opinion. Equity meant punishing success so failures could fail upwards. Equality meant we're all equally miserable. Tolerance was the new definition for tyranny. As for hate crimes, now it meant punishing some hate, but not all hate, because approved haters were allowed to freely hate 24 hours a day and make global headlines. That's right about the time that sensitivity readers hit the scene. They started editing every book so you wouldn't hurt yourself thinking. That's how much they loved you. James Bond was rewritten from a spy into a man with a 30-day AA chip who didn't have sex and cried after every kill. Roald Dahl's famous Big Friendly Giant book was sanitized for sensitive souls into the average-sized friendly person. And suddenly, I looked around, and all the books that I had read as a child were gone. Babar, the little elephant, had been charged with French colonial crimes. Dr. Seuss had been sizzled with the racist branding iron for drawing cartoons in 1942. Yet, wouldn't you know it, Cardi B was celebrated as a feminist icon for teaching little girls how to shake it for rent money with WAP. Unfortunately, books, music, and movies were only a small part of the postmodern problem. Al-Qaeda used TikTok to build a new fan base that knocked Taylor Swift off the top 10 charts. Jussie Smollett turned primetime tears into a punchline. NASCAR turned a garage pole handle into a noose that they wanted to lynch everyone that was laughing at the idea. Will Smith turned cucked into a household word after slapping Chris Rock to try to prove that he wasn't cucked. And the Washington Redskins, they were turned into the Commanders because they were scalped by the PC police. And did you know if you happened to enter the country's capital illegally, you were turned into a criminal for life? But if you entered the country illegally, you got a VIP suite at the Ritz. You can thank New York City taxpayers for that one. Then suddenly, Selena Gomez turned on the waterworks. She turned on the tears and cried about deportation. Because open borders, she said, only let the good people in. Now I dare you, just go and ask Lincoln Riley's mom about that one. But see, if you didn't agree with any of that, if you didn't go along with any of it, they called you deplorable. The American dream wasn't for Americans anymore. Learn to code was a message only for blue-collar workers, not MSNBC anchors. Gas heaters, they told you, had to fucking go because they said we needed to save the planet and it would take 240 years. In the meantime, just freeze. College, your ticket to success, only if you satisfied the quota queens and admissions. Protests were sacred unless you were a Canadian trucker. Statues had to come down, topple them all, because history hurt the feelings of those who failed history class. And Hollywood? Well, Hollywood turned into a homeless shelter for gender studies majors. Then suddenly a mask became a fashion accessory, freedom became an afterthought, and overnight, my body, my choice became your body, my choice. Obey or hit the highway. You know, 6th century Chinese philosopher Lao Tzu once said, try to make a people moral and you make them evil. When woke read that post on Facebook, they licked their lips with envy because the oppression industry had one rule. If you want love, then you got to fight hate with even more hate. And hate was a big business and business was good. Except there was only one tiny little problem. We already solved all the big problems. We fought a civil war to kill slavery. We kicked Jim Crow in the crotch to kill hatred. We marched, we protested, we passed new laws. Everything bad from a bygone era was already buried 6 foot deep. The only thing left were bad people. And they had been around since the beginning of time, and they would be around till the end. Basically, the bottom line is we won. And woke couldn't handle that. Because without racism, BLM couldn't buy Beverly Hills mansions. If Latinx was laid to rest, John Leguizamo wouldn't be able to explain what the word means to Hispanics. If homophobia died, Harley Davidson wouldn't have anyone to sell shiny bikes to. If laws were read before they were passed, we wouldn't know who to throw out of office. If all the problems were literally solved, politicos couldn't pick our pockets. If America wasn't defined as being a burning hellscape, then hate couldn't continue being the multi-billion-dollar industry year after year. Remember, there were literally trillions at stake. DEI, identity politics, social engineering, social justice, intersectionalism, tribalism, all words. But all words with one goal: to reprogram your subconscious to feel guilty for crimes you never committed, kind of like reparations for people who never were slaves, being paid by people who never owned slaves. That's how the country that beat the British Empire, stomped the Nazis, crushed the commies, landed a man on a moon before we ever questioned what a woman was, created the internet, gave the world rock, rap, hip-hop, and jazz, gave women the right to vote, legalized gay marriage, and believe and live and let live. That is how that country was hijacked by people who cry in HR meetings. And have you ever questioned any of it? Congratulations. You're a bigot. A life sentence with no appeal and no parole. Unfortunately, that was the most dangerous time that came next. When woke wanted to stress test the system by throwing fuel on a fire that wasn't burning. They wanted to see how much people would actually take. So they started by telling the world that riots were peaceful, that cities in flames were just barbecues in the summer of love, that lootings were reparations, that criminals were the real victims, that stealing was even legal in some states. Just keep it under $950 a pop. It didn't matter if it meant millions lost, if stores moved away, if jobs disappeared, if neighborhoods vanished and turned into ghost towns. That was their vision for the world. Welcome to Woketopia, a place where the police are defunded and banned, where 10 cities stretch for miles and junkies drop deuces between hipster coffee shops selling $25 kale smoothies, all while pickleball influencers live stream tournaments of them playing with their lonely balls. That was the vision they had for the world. And then they turned around and told me that my speech was violence, that free speech was hate speech, but hate speech from the historically hated was the greatest speech of all. That sticks and stones may break my bones, but free speech kills everyone not approved to speak by the speech police. And about that time, that's when all the ists and isms and phobes came out of the closet and announced to the world that they were a throuple because they wanted to jump on the bandwagon and get in on the grift. That's when I was called an ageist because I didn't want to see Martha Stewart in a Sports Illustrated swimsuit. That's when I was called an ableist because I helped a blind man cross the street because apparently letting him walk in traffic is somehow empowering. That's when I was called a misogynist because I thought men and women were different. When I was called a specious because I loved humanity more than AI. When I was called a capitalist because I believed in the American dream. When I was called a populist because I loved my country. When I was called a terrorist because I loved it too much. When I was called a socialist because I helped people in need. And I was a Marxist for organizing a food drive. Then suddenly I was called a fascist because I hated every communist I ever saw. That's the circle of woke life. Ain't it grand? And then, of course, the phobes had to have their say. I was called a homophobe because I didn't like the movie Bros. Who in the world did? I was an assophobe because I loved sex and didn't understand people who didn't. I was a cacophobe because I loved seeing my Hollywood stars look like gods and goddesses, not Walmart greeters. The only thing I was really shocked about is that I wasn't called an alethiophone. Because between you and me, I truly loathe stupid people. Rule number 1 in the universal rules for life. The world primarily consists of morons. Once you accept this, you'll have half the stress and sleep like a baby at night. Then right on cue is when the pronoun police arrive. They told me my speech had to change even more. They said that if I got pronouns wrong, that was literal murder, that my identity was signed, but yours was created, that Johnny and Jane was oppressive, but Zer was empowering, that fish self was a thing, that dog self was valid, that bird selves could chirp, but they couldn't fly, that two-spirited was holy and sacred, but non-binary was the latest rage. And then suddenly, grown adults in giant giraffe suits had more rights than anyone labeled cis. But that's when the shit really hit the fan, when the Salem witch trials came back into style. It's when I was told that women's sports weren't for women anymore. It's when J.K. Rowling went from Harry Potter's mommy one day to TERF Hitler the next. Why? Because she said women exist. That's it. And all the people who dressed as Hermione every Halloween wanted to suddenly burn her at the digital stake. That is when Leah Thomas broke every record and dared anyone to say anything about it. That's when the jails opened the floodgates and storks delivered a baby boom. When the Olympics live streamed a woman getting her brains beat in. When allyship became the new word of the day and treated suffragettes like old socks and turned Me Too into mulch. That's when the English language turned into a sacred alphabet soup. And if you got a vowel or consonant wrong, you were marked for social crucifixion. That's when doctors decided to rewrite the Hippocratic Oath for the puritanical woke. Do no harm was surgically transitioned into a fight for climate change and colonialism. Health didn't stand a chance in 2022. Then suddenly, Libs of TikTok was unleashed. Riley Gaines said no. Martina Navratilova showcased a grand slam with her explosive online backhand. And suddenly, Elon Musk popped back up on the scene. He bought Twitter, canceled censorship, caught a heavy rocket ship with chopsticks, and told Disney to go fuck itself. But the entire time, there was one man always standing by our side. He stood between us and them, and his name was Trump. And he put the fear of God in everyone. Never forget, universal rules for life. Rule number 2, extreme control is always a reaction to extreme fear. And the woke were so afraid that they doubled down and wrote a new commandment in their kale chips. And just like everyone, just like we had the burning bush and Moses with the 10 commandments, the woke had their edition, hairy. So from every hairy, armpitted girl, there came the unholy word. Patriotism was a plague. America was evil. Freedom was old-fashioned. The Second Amendment meant that guns were for government and criminals only, and sometimes those were the same things. Drugs were illegal, but you could get free needles and a pipe from your local mayor. Teachers said that they could raise kids better than their parents could. Public education guaranteed, they said, the golden path to life. Of course, public education always needs more money and meat for the gladiator ring. School choice was declared as the devil's work. Even though these people never believed in the beast, they still worshipped Alinsky's Lucifer. And that's when they came out of the closet and they told us that natural aging with its gray hair was sick. But Botoxing your vaginal box and bleaching your bum was the absolute bomb. That's when the cult of woke became impatient and launched their war on 5 fronts. In energy, famous climatologist Greta Thunberg told farmers what they could plant. Fossil fuels were declared as foul as a frat house couch. Cow farts were banned as weapons of mass destruction against Mother Nature, and drill, baby, drill was replaced with shut up and buy a Prius. In entertainment, Hollywood swapped out the hero's journey for primal scream therapy sessions, group hugs, fired all the masculine leads, and then replaced actors with intimacy coordinators. Because didn't you know, even a handshake today needs to be scripted to avoid everybody going to court. That's when the video game industry bent the knee. So now every final boss battle is a fight against the patriarchy and nasty oppressive words. Even my favorite game, Dungeons & Dragons, the role-playing game I played as a kid, finally toed the line. They told their players that they could throw their arms up in the air to form an X anytime the dice roll hurt their feelings. In the military, DEI and CRT turned the armed forces into a pride parade with tanks. Fighter pilots got maternity flight suits. Special forces got dog collars and dog masks for every national security ball. And West Point changed their 126-year mission statement, get this, from duty, honor, country, to blah, 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 Army values. In education, it was the same thing. 2 + 2 = depression. Kids knew their LGBTs before their ABCs, and every Ivy League freshman shelling out $88K a year was all for nothing. It was for a 3-credit course, Intro to Fat Studies. As for comedy, it was banned on every college campus. Anywhere it did exist, it got trigger warnings with every punchline. Protesters followed comedians to every club, and Dave Chappelle was outlawed as a hate criminal. In comedy, jokes were outlawed on every college campus. Trigger warnings were served with every punchline, and protesters followed comedians to every club. Dave Chappelle was labeled a hate criminal simply for making people laugh. That was the war of woke on 5 fronts. Each battle turned families into feuding clans, communities into warring tribes, converted schools into recruitment centers, all while transforming microaggressions into full-scale wars. Traditions were trashed, reality was stripped-mined of sanity, merit was reclassified as a carcinogen, meltdowns were monetized on TikTok, and recreational outrage became the new performance art. Then suddenly, neighborhoods became the new petting zoos. You could literally drive by and see these full-grown, 2-legged creatures known as formerly humans with their heads buried in the sand, waiting for their next set of commands. Division had set in, but division wasn't a side effect, it was the goal. Woke had rebranded all of society as a war between oppressors versus oppressed. It was fat versus fit, strong versus the spaghetti spined. It was fugly versus femme fatale, and normal versus nincompoop. This is exactly what they wanted. It was never about equality and inclusion. There was no new Camelot on the horizon. This was about raw power and greed. Literally, like I said, trillions at stake. And when you create permanent victims, you guarantee permanent war. Division was their manna from heaven, even though they never believed in God. But there was hope, a light at the end of the tunnel. If we fought the good fight, there was a way back, a return to the beginning. Cheap gas, free-range roaming humans, not 15-minute city livestock, planes that flew, cities that ran, prosecutors that punished crime, parents that gave a damn, government that got out of the way, great storytelling, comedians that spit fire, not practice safe space stand-up, and you tie it all together with critical thinking, courage, hard work, sweat, calloused hands, and you create a great country where chests are puffed out and people hold their heads high and never bowed. Except there's still one missing ingredient, the glue that bound everything together. Freedom. The freedom to live how you wanted without asking anyone's permission. And that angered woke the most. That's when the world finally had enough and the war of woke was winding to an end. You suddenly looked around and saw sobbing activists and blue-haired casualties clutching onto their nose rings like it was a life raft in a Category 5 reality check. All the cultists finally realized that their golden calf was made of paper mache and it was fueled by hedge funds, the Hollywood Hive, George Soros, his son Alex, and the entire guest list of prisoner number 37452, also known as Diddy. See, 1 minute they had it all. They were standing on a podium with their fists in the air, and the next minute they were deleting old tweets, erasing they, them from their bio like it was a felony record. Here's looking at you, oh crazy, oh. Because when they finally realized that the DEI VP built in a DC lab greased by coastal elites and carried by Hollywood like a Make-A-Wish kid on an Avengers set got steamrolled by a man who took a bullet, stood up, and growled, "Fight, fight, fight," they knew it was the end. It wasn't just an election loss, it was a cultural exorcism. Trump was back, the MAGA king returned, the Uniparty was bleeding out, warmongers wailed into their wine glasses, politicos smoked aged Parmesan like it was their last meal, lobbyists hit the pipe harder than Hunter in a hotel room. And then suddenly, Elon jumped 5 feet, Bill Gates dry heaved into a paper bag, the View's hyenas hyperventilated, Jeff Bezos switched side, Mark Zuckerberg apologized, and then you had it. Fauci froze, the feds freaked, the EU fainted, and JD, Tulsi, Vivek, RFK, and Musk formed Trump's new Justice League. And they had one mission, to fight for truth, justice, and the American way. And it was a beautiful sight to see. That's when Catholic Charities finally got on its knees for the first time. But not for God, of course, but to pray for their government checks to continue. When crickets returned to being bugs, not make-believe burgers. When the network news held a funeral, X and YouTube became the new media kings. And when MAGA proved itself, it wasn't just a slogan, it was an official eviction notice. The age of men returned, the age of women roared back to life, the age of kids being kids roared back to life. No longer used for politics, it was just about play. The revolution of common sense had kicked crazy to the curb and then kicked its ass right out of the country. The new golden age was here, and let me tell you, it wasn't given, it was taken. But the woke, you can say the woke didn't take it pretty well. They had a meltdown, but not your ordinary average meltdown, not your Rachel Maddow cries on election night meltdown, not your soy latte sipping meltdown from 2016. Nope, this was a full-scale air raid siren, fetal positions, institutions collapsing. Dear God, what have we done meltdown? The world had finally had enough, and they flipped the table on woke like a wrecking ball. Democracy dies in darkness, lost, and my grocery bills just doubled, and I can't afford to make scrambled eggs. Diversity lost, and my kids can't read. America last, lost to America first. Perpetual corporate wars lost to permanent peace. California saved the smelt, lost to we need waters to put out wildfires. A president who couldn't string a sentence together, lost to a man who never backed down. An orange man bad won 80 million votes because the borders were wide open, and he was the only elected man who loved his country's flag. This was the new day, and the aftershocks hit harder than Gina Carano's lawsuit against Disney and Justine Bateman's wise-based words. Canada panicked, Trudeau curled into a ball, put on blackface, then whimpered mommy, before standing up and looking to the cameras to say people kind, all before exiting public life. Panama's president looked out the window to see if American flags already lined the canal. Colombia's president bent the knee so fast his government got whiplash and the world thought they were French. Mexico put up 10 cities so fast for Biden's border brothers. And then Germany pulled down all the refugees' welcome banners to bury them back in another unmarked grave to add to their collection. And then you had the UK citizens. They demanded heat and freedom, not DEI bobbies locking away all their blokes simply for posting their beloved Union Jacks. Japan threw a parade, Italy partied, Israel smiled, Hungary hungered for more, and the Greeks left the sheep alone long enough to say Opa. And as for Hollywood, well, half of Hollywood congratulated number 47. The other half, well, they still haven't figured out the fact they're adult pretenders getting paid to pretend. They can't figure out why people didn't listen to them. The very same people that they scolded, demonized, lectured, attacked, called toxic for years. All those people, like you and me, they stopped listening. They started doing their own thing. They started speaking the truth to power. Then suddenly, like an ex waking up from a 6-year gaslighting relationship, the world finally saw what a freak show it had become. The TikTok sermons, the hormone evangelists, the man-bun philosophers whose biggest problem was trying to find another hot pocket in their mommy's basement, the soy baristas treating cops like criminals and criminals like customers, the progressive husbands who braided their wives' hair as their wives' boyfriends bent them over in full beast mode. The world had had enough. The world was done with woke, and the cult knew they were screwed. One minute they had it all. Wall Street, the White House, the DC swamp, and the next minute it was gone. And just like that, the reckoning came swift, savage, and Doge pill. Companies scrubbed their ESG pages. The Pentagon outlawed DEI. Diversity officers updated their LinkedIn to freelancer. The CIA pulled down its rainbow flag and went back to killing. The Babylon Bees headlines now became reality. And Gamergate sharpened their online knives. It turned out that all the guys and gals had been right all along. The government had indeed been funding the Code of Woke to program in all their digital games. And the panic that had set in was real, but there was nothing they could do about it. And it was just the overture. Harvard professors screamed for free speech protections. The Kennedy Center screamed for Maylock shots. Maxine Waters screamed the fascists are here. Ayanna Presley screamed that Iowa is too white. Social justice warriors screamed for a hunger strike. And then they remembered. They believed in body positivity, which meant eating more. So the SJWs finally decided to eat themselves. That's when the UN screamed for an urgent intervention. Americans were finally thinking for themselves. And suddenly, every 3-letter agency under the sun knew what it was like to be a little ant facing a giant boot. Sunlight had disinfected the shadows and threw USAID on the chopping block. The Clintons lost their piggy bank, Soros lost his slush fund, leftist political magazine lost its $8 million check to slander the right, Sri Lanka lost $8 million to teach journalists how to avoid gendered binary language, and even Ireland had stuck its nose in the trough. It lost $72,000 to put on a musical called DEI, because apparently nothing says art like a struggle session in song form. The legacy media was officially dead, and the new kings had already taken their thrones. CNN called transparency a threat to democracy and canceled itself. Jennifer Rubin quit the Washington Post to spend more time with her cats. Jim Acosta quit so he could spend more time on Substack. BuzzFeed shared a bedpan with the Huffington Post. Bill Maher pivoted, saying he was anti-woke all along, and Alex Jones and Tucker had the biggest laugh in the world. Even the Lincoln Project said America is over before deleting their accounts. Brian Stelter tried to make a YouTube comeback. It lasted 4 videos. And then suddenly all the late-night comedians from Colbert to Kimmel stopped laughing because they realized they were the butt of the joke. And if you want to know what happened to good old Joe, well, Biden ended up signing with CAA, Hollywood's most powerful talent agency, just 4 days before President Trump canceled his security clearances. As for cackles, well, good old Kamala went from the DEI VP back to a gourmet cook and washing her greens in the tub. And America finally united in joy, the joy that she had always promised, as the entire country laughed. As for me, I laughed. I laughed like a kid watching a bully get hit by a dodgeball. I laughed like a chaos monkey putting the zookeepers back in the cage. I laughed like a proud Texan looking at a Google map that now read Gulf of America. I laughed like it was the end of a bad movie, because it was. So I'll ask, are you tired of winning yet? Because we're only getting started. The era of woke is over. Masks are off. Meat is back on the menu. The pronoun pins are in the trash. And salty leftist tears are America's new ketchup. The only safe space left is reality. And for some, it's gonna hurt.